Can I jump
Yes.
in? I want to add just, I think really getting people to work together was one of Donn's more brilliant aspects, and it was a very interesting but subtle strategy because people would come up with these fantastical ideas of something they wanted to do in the show, and of course you'd sit there and you'd think, man, how are we going to do that? And Donn would get very excited by these ideas and say, great, do it. And so we'd have to say, well, he really likes the idea. He seems to think we can do it. So we got to do it. So, and that, I think, in just catching up with people over the last couple of days, that has been always one of my strongest memories of M&B is the enthusiasm that Donn had that was contagious to us, and his belief that we could just pretty much pull off anything we had a mind to do, or anything we could imagine, we could somehow pull it off. And by and large, I think we did. And that was really good training as far as I'm concerned for theater and a few other things too.
Well, as I said earlier, that has been a real part of my life. I've got a lot of life skills out of doing Calliopes, but people on the earlier panel were talking about astonishing moments. My mother had one when she came, I think it was last the day Cleveland, because there was a point where, I don't remember why, but there was going to be this meeting between the monks and the nuns, and the music starts out, they kind of march out on stage very reverently, and then all of a sudden break out into the intercloister mixer. And the chitter-hugging and the carryings on, and they were throwing each other around. We had a great time with that song. But my mother said to me afterwards, they let you do that in a Catholic school? And again, she didn't know till then that it was the Wild West here. So, but it was. There were always these things too about where you were going to put the kick line. You know, I was always having to figure out where in the show is the kick line going to go. But of course, no matter where you put it, it brought down the house just because it was a kick line. So it was always great fun to do. We want to make sure that we have as many contributions from people in the audience as we have up here. And one of the things I was interested in also talking to you all about is what do you remember as having to change? That, I mean, do any of you have a memory of having to let something go that you really wanted in the show, but it just couldn't stay there?
Well, there are about six ballads that I wanted to take that away. And Dr. Murphy just knocked down every single one of them. And also, I also have always wanted to have a chorus song with a nice quiet ending, that sort of peters off. And it just, every ending of every chorus song just got bigger and bigger. But the thing is, it wasn't because of dictation, it's just you got you so enthusiastic about the idea of, yeah, that's nice, the nice quiet ending. But think about what it would be like if, if we brought in the tenors and we brought in the sopranos here, and then he gesticulates and it's all exciting, and it's like he's the first person who ever discovered a major triad at the end of the song. But yeah, I used to write really sort of soppy ballads, and he was the one actually who taught me that it has to be the specific person in the specific situation, and it's not just enough to write. I love that that person put something specific in it, and so I'll do an outtake of the 6 ballads from me.
John?
We never had to cut anything. We had the problem of brainstorming to think if there was any group we hadn't offended. You go back to that intercloister mixer, we had nuns in fishnet stockings.
Salvation at the intercloister mixer.
She was the Mother Superior. And the head of campus ministries pronounced the show disgusting.
In other words, it was a big success.
I have to say, because Pat Friedlander is here, that in Bryan's show, One Sleepless Night, we invited a group of underprivileged, I guess, kids to come to a matinee. And the prince and the princess are standing on stage, and the princess said to the prince, "I cannot love you." And this little African-American girl stood up, she was in the front row, and she said, "I will love you." So I thought we had succeeded. And that was Bryan's music. They had just done a lovely ballad or a wedded woman.
I am Pat Friedlander, shoemaker, and I am just going to say one thing, because that role in One Sleepless Night was so amazing to me. I was 5 feet 9 inches tall. Almost nobody was taller than I was, and men. And I had never in my whole life been allowed to play an ingenue. I played everything. I never played an ingenue. And I still remember we were all sitting in Teeham trying to figure out how Dr. Murphy was going to cast the show. And, because there was the witch, and and I got called back to stand next to Nigel McLaughlin. And once you had me stand next to Nigel McLaughlin, who was going to play the prince, I guess you said, okay, this can work. And I became the princess in a long pink dress with long hair, which I never in my whole life had thought that anybody would give me that role. So that was a moment of astonishment for me.
You always do a side gag when he saw it.
We have a lot of performers out there. Some of you who had to go, talking about changes in shows, is there anybody out there, I think Andrea was telling me a story earlier today. Do you want to share that with everyone about the kind of last minute changes that got made?
On opening night, arriving madly through Friday traffic, get to stage one, going to throw on the makeup, and then Donna said, "Come over here." And I said, "Oh geez, now what have I done?" And she said, "We have a whole new song, and it's got all these verses, and here's the choreography. 6 p.m. 6 p.m. We had to learn this thing, Dan and I. And we tried, well, I was pretty good with the dance part, and Dan was busily memorized, and we were trying to memorize this. In the show, at this point, we're somewhere up in the scaffolding, like way up there, very teetery-tottery, high heels, fishnets, cobweb dress, and we have to climb down this sucker as the intro's going, da-da-da-da-da-da, or no, whatever that was. And then climbing down the thing, got to the floor, I looked at Dan, and it was one of those, oh my God moments. I don't know the words. I didn't say anything because he already knew, and he looked at me and he said, "Who put the sun in the sky?" And he started going, and I suddenly remembered. So between the two of us, we got the job done. It was only by closing night that we actually nailed the sun. Oh my God.
Which Calliope was it?
I don't know.
No, it was Wasp that ate Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, funny.
I still haven't recovered.
Actually, for that show, we had the auditions, and Andrea took this little tiny part that was nothing, and in the audition, she just blew everybody away. So we completely rewrote the show and wrote the part for Andrea because she was so brilliant, and she was brilliant.
So,
I have a question.
yeah.
Okay, and this is for Dr. Murphy. One of the things that I remember, and because I see it all the time in the theater now, and I don't know if it was from a Calliope or not, was that I remember that you came up with this idea when we were doing some show that you were going to have slides and pictures and in the back. And at the time, I have to admit, a lot of us were kind of like, what's this? And then, and it worked well on the show, and then for years afterwards, whenever I would go to shows in New York on Broadway and they started doing all this multimedia stuff, I would go, that Donn, he was really ahead of his time. Do you know what show that was? I honestly don't remember. I just remember that.
We did some with, we did some with that show, but then the first time we used it in a major role throughout the entire production, I think, was Roar of the Grease Paint.
Okay, I didn't remember where it was. I just remember that as
three
the...
different screens going simultaneously, all during the performance. And that was, I think, the first time we used projection on a major
This is
scale.
the arrival of the carousel projector.
That's right.
But to do it around the screens behind, over the audience. I also remember one time that I heard there's such a thing as a laser, and we were actually, it was in, believe it or not, Death of a Salesman. We were doing kind of a, not the typical version of Death of a Salesman. One thing I always regretted, I wanted to get empty beer cans and make the whole stage of stage one be beer cans so that Willie Loman would be like the rat on this grid. But that was one thing I couldn't see to But we did borrow a laser from the physics department, and they told us, if this laser gets near anyone's eye, they will be blinded. Today, you get them in cereal boxes. But I remember the laser was up there, and the tech crew had bolted it up and put 2x4s and all, but it reflected on mirrors around, and you had a little smoke, a little mist to make it work. It was very effective, but it's just funny to me now when you see lasers that are, not so dangerous as they were then. We tried to be on the cutting edge of technology.
That was the Ezra Pound production, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
Ezra Pound?
Yes.
Wasn't that where the laser was used? Eiffel Tower.
Well, was that it? In that show we had big mirrors. We got all these broken fragments of mirrors and put them on diagonals of plywood, and it reflected.
I was in Ivory Tower and there were no lasers.
When we did the projections for Roar of the Grease Paint, which was the first time we used the carousels, and we did have them on 3 different aspects, and at least one of those projectors shot off a mirror and went sideways.
Yeah.
But it was not good enough to use a carousel projector because it cuts off and it's harsh and it's sharp. So each screen had 2 projectors, and we cross-faded between them, which was something that Dr. Murphy insisted on because the alternative was just not elegant.